If you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz. I'm here today with...
Zero.
Zero, how you doing this week?
A little exhausted. The project I'm working on is coming to the end of the first chapter. The second chapter is maintenance mode, so I'll be hopefully hearing what my marching orders are, maybe either early next week or by the end of this week, so we'll see how things go.
Ah, I see. So your plans for world domination are coming to fruit. All right, that's good to hear. So we're here today to review the 1975 mystery thriller Picnic at Hanging Rock, directed by Peter Weir. Zero, I'm just going to come out with it, man. I don't know how to feel about this movie. All I know right now, I like the movie, but I have a mix of emotions when it comes to this movie and what to feel about it. And I thought we would just start off the review right away. And basically, the plot is about a group of girls in the 1900s in Australia who go on a picnic at a place called Hanging Rock, and they mysteriously disappear. The movie is basically about what happens after that event happens. Let's just talk about the film right off the bat. What are your thoughts that you want to get off your chest first?
It was kind of an interesting movie. It leaves a lot of questions, but I think that's sort of kind of the thematic element that they sort of want with this movie, especially since it isn't quite explained what causes some of these girls to go missing.
Yes. Absolutely. I think that is exactly the point, because I think people who are going to watch this wanting to have clues or wanting to say, like, well, what happened to the girls are going to be incredibly disappointed by that. I think that wasn't the point of the film at all. It was to basically say, oh my God, how did this happen? There's multiple themes to this movie, but I think this was more about a film about innocence lost. And what's interesting about that theme is when you think innocence lost, you think about a child growing into an adult and realizing the world that they had isn't exactly what they thought it was, and it was much darker and more serious than what you thought. But the honest truth is that the innocence was lost from the adults in this movie.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting too. I know there was one scene at the end where it seems like a happy reunion that just spirals out of control, and I felt that was sort of kind of like the loss of innocence of the girls from the all-girls school, in my opinion, because like you have just one of the pivotal characters who had went missing but was coincidentally rescued, just coming to kind of try to say goodbye to her classmates. It just spirals into madness and chaos. The filming for that particular scene just captures the madness and insanity so well, and it was just like, wow. I think these girls they kind of had to come to the fact that their other classmates are forever gone and no one will ever know why. They've just finally come to that realization, and it has just broken their young minds.
I see what your point is with that, and I kind of agree with you on that there was a bit of innocence lost on that end. But I also saw the resilience of the girls after that, where they kind of moved on, and they've also just continued to be who they are, and they seem still to be happy in a sort of way, and still trying to be themselves. But it's really the adults who are forever changed in this. Once they felt like they were in control of their lives and their destinies, and in their little fiefdoms that they were. Now they are the realization of, oh, there is something we haven't conquered, and we may not be able to do that. Because you look at the headmistress, for example, in the movie, she actually is in tight control of the entire school, and it's run efficiently and very well, and everyone's happy. When the girls come missing, everything unravels. Certain girls get really depressed. Others are just not taking it very well. One becomes more controlling. One gets really upset and guilt-ridden. And then the headmistress starts to slowly get colder and colder and colder until eventually what happens at the end. I think another theme about this is also a theme of nature versus modernity. And you look at how the film is shot and how everything is done in the film when it comes to modernity. Like, look at the school. They're reading from fancy books. They have table manners, and they're very regimented in working in that specific society. You put that element out from these girls, and what happens? They're lost. They don't know what to do. They are completely ill-equipped for nature in that end, and nature engulfs them. It just seems like that nature overtakes everything at a certain point, is the feeling I got from this movie.
I think for me, the one piece that I thought was interesting was just the sense of mystery with Hanging Rock, because This was the early days of Australia's history. A lot of the wildlands in Australia were really places that were familiar and known to the Aborigines, but it was still very foreign and very new to those who had settled from Britain or had lived in kind of the big cities and everything and really didn't venture out into nature. Because it was out in nature and nature was something that the Aborigines are real familiar with, it was kind of like a mysterious place just overall, because you kind of see it in the beginning when the headmaster sort of prefaces the girls about the trip saying, hey, beware, have your wits about you. There are poisonous snakes around, so be careful. This is not somewhere to just go gallivanting about.
You notice how everybody in modern society was looking for these girls and couldn't find them. Who found the girl?
One of the boys.
One of the boys. And it was the boy that wasn't part of modern society, was it? It was the boy that was more in tune with nature. He was an outdoorsman. He knew what would be around the area. He knew how to survive. That was a guy that was more comfortable being outside and was more of an outdoorsman than anybody, and he was able to find the one girl. Why was that? Because I think he was more in tune with nature.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, because I know his friend had originally tried to get on the search because he had felt bad. He was just like, this is wrong, we've got to go find him. And he ends up kind of on a fruitless search, and on his final search that just leads him to a shred of a clue, he ends up having to just tap out because he's just physically out. And then you have this other boy just sort of pick up off the chase, and he ends up being the one that's successful. And it's a great point that this other boy who ends up actually finding one of the other girls, he's actually the one who is the outdoorsman, who is someone who is bonded with nature. He isn't one of those who's part of the upper class, dressed in fine clothes and things like that.
Now, to be fair to the other boy, though, he did do most of the legwork to find exactly where she could be. I want to give that credit to where it's due there, because I think because he's close to that outdoorsman boy, he picked up something of those things. It is interesting that the one person who is most attuned with the outdoors is the one that actually was able to successfully find one of the girls. So I thought that was an interesting thing as well. I think one of the most effective things about this movie is the ethereal, unsettling nature of the film, and I think it just suffocates the entire film, but in a very subtle way. What's the most dominant sound in the movie?
Oh god, I can't remember.
I would just say it's nature itself. Whenever it's outside, you're not hearing much of a score unless it is to really punch up the drama. But what you hear most is just birds chirping, crickets, the swaying of grass, wind. I find it interesting how the nature of the land is the most dominant sound in the movie. But when you hear music, it really hits because, boom, it's there. Because all you're really used to is hearing nature sounds. Now, when you're inside, it's different. It's a lot more quiet. It's got some nice music to accompany it. But when most of the film is in nature, all you really hear are the sounds of the outside. And I think that was a interesting thing to do, because the sounds get, I think, louder when the girls are going through Hanging Rock.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a interesting connection, that nature is a very predominant sound featured in the movie. And then when you have moments where there is music being played, it definitely kind of brings about a specific tone that is trying to be kind of inferred to the viewer and everything.
I gotta be honest, man. When it comes to how I feel about the movie, I do like this film. I just don't know how much I like the film. Because the film does leave you cold. And it does leave you to be disturbed, but not in a way where you're like, oh my god, whoa. It's more like, man, I don't know how to feel about this. But this definitely feels like a multi-viewing movie for me to get its full effect, to get more out of the film, to see what more that the film is trying to say. That is a sign of a quality film, where you can take out all these things from the film on your first watch, but you still think something is missing. And I think that's my big thing that I have with this. I feel like something is there that I haven't grasped on yet, and I'm going to need another viewing to do so. Do you feel the same way, or are you just like, nah, bitch, I know what I'm talking about?
I think one watch was good enough for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I feel like I kind of understood where the movie was going for and everything. I think where it is unsettling is the end on how they kind of make it feel like it's a real life mystery of just kind of closing it on. They tried to search for the other girls, but at some point they stopped. It's still the biggest mystery. We don't know what ever happened to those girls.
I guess if the thematic elements aren't something that you're entirely interested in, and you just are interested in the whodunit, there aren't many clues in the film to really gauge as to what happened. That really isn't the point of the film, but if the other elements just don't grab you as much, then I can see why maybe you would not be interested in seeing this a second or third time like I would. I would say, yeah, I would agree. If you're basing it on like a story and the mystery and the characters, movie's not for you. That's not what this movie is. But I think the thematic elements, the things that make it very interesting and very different, I think it's what really is sparking me to think that I want to watch this a second time, to see what more I can get out of it. All right, so Zero, we are at the footnotes section of Picnic at Hanging Rock, and I think you've got one, so go right ahead.
This movie was interesting when I was kind of trying to do some background research on this movie. It's apparently adapted off of a 1967 novel of very same name. Mm-hmm. The novel itself is interesting mostly because it's presented in kind of a pseudo-historical sort of way. The reception of the novel has just been kind of more centered around the mysterious conclusion and just depicting Australia's natural environment just being very, very mysterious, which contrasts to the modernization that the people who came from Britain had sort of set up with Victorian sensibilities and everything. It's just kind of interesting that this was adapted by a novel that seems to be thought of very critically, which I thought was interesting because as far as I could tell, it seems like that the movie definitely was respectful to the novel, which is always interesting to see because I'm just so used to any sort of movie that's adapted from a novel to just have pieces and parts just kind of chopped up here and there just to try to condense everything down for time.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the novel either by Joan Lindsay, but a director like Peter Weir, I mean, he also did Master and Commander as well, which I believe was also based off of a novel. These types of directors, when they're more in the sensibility of trying to get a place and mood and time and to really to tell its story, they tend to be a lot more faithful to novels that they're trying to base things off of. Because when they read those novels, there's a reason why they pick them. Because there's something about them that elicits a mood and a feeling, and they want to capture that as best as possible. And if the novel itself is supposed to be mysterious in that nature, then I think he also pretty much nailed that. And also, Peter Weir is just a very good director. He's one that doesn't really do much anymore when it comes to directing. I forget what his last movie was, but the most popular one I think that people will recognize him for is The Truman Show, which to this day I think is an excellent movie. I love The Truman Show.
There was actually something more on kind of the humorous side. I thought it was a great and interesting film as well too, but I was kind of curious to see if there was any sort of historical anecdotes about how the movie reviewed and everything. I think this one anecdote was really funny. Apparently during a 1979 reviewing of the film, there was somebody who was completely upset at the ending of it that they threw their coffee cup at the screen and basically shouted that they felt like that they wasted 2 hours of their life and said something to the sense of, this is a mystery without a goddamn solution. This story was recounted by critic Vincent Canby in the documentary A Dream Within a Dream. And when I saw that, I was laughing. I was just like, that had to have been just completely wild just for somebody to just lose their shit and just pick up their coffee cup and throw it at the screen.
I'll be honest too, though. I've done it myself. When I was working, we had a big meeting for managers at the time, and the market manager at the time decided the best way to utilize our time at the meeting was to show a movie. And he showed a movie called 7 Days in Utopia. Spoiler alert, it is a terrible movie. It is awful. And it's a movie that is predominantly centered at Christians. That's not why it's awful, but it's an awful movie. It's about a golfer who gets lost in this town called Utopia, and he has to find his way by finding Jesus and whatever else, I don't care. The whole point of the film is like he's trying to get himself back up to win this tournament. At the end of the movie, I'm spoiling the entire movie, at the end of the movie, at the final putt in the sports movie, where you're supposed, oh my god, is he going to make the putt? Is he gonna win? He hits the ball. The film then pulls back into a photo of him attempting the putt, and then some narration happens, and then the film ends. And then it goes, if you want to learn what happened, go to this website and we'll tell you. I'm like, what the fuck? Wait a minute. And I said this out loud in the entire meeting in front of other managers. What bullshit is this? One of the other guys who was with me goes, dude, you said that out loud. I'm, oh, shit. Whoops. I'm guilty of that, too. I've had that visceral reaction as well. But yeah, it is funny to see some people do that. Like, it is absolutely hilarious. But I'm not going to pretend that I'm not beneath that. I've done it myself. I do it to myself when I'm watching films privately. When I'm doing, like, what the fuck were they thinking? Like, I watched Betty Blue about 2 weeks ago. And when they get to a certain point in the movie, I'm like, what the hell? Like, what was the point of this? And I have to be told, lower your voice, I'm sleeping. I'm like, all right, I'm sorry. But, like, if you saw what I just saw, you would say the same thing. Anyway, so, yeah, that is funny when it happens. But I'm more guilty of it than I would care to actually admit to. What do you think happened to the girls? What is your theory on that? I know we talked already that what happened to the girls really isn't the point. But there are certain clues as to what the fate of the girls were. What do you think happened?
One thought I had was they may have had delirium that was onset by dehydration. At multiple points, you see the four girls who venture up Hanging Rock just getting tired, just laying directly out in the sun. They just kind of seem overcome. One of the girls just continuously groans about just how miserable she is outside and it's hot and it's gross, but the other girls don't really have that sort of situation. They're just kind of laying about, kind of like they're kind of in a trance. And then when we get some of the later details of just some of these girls just being down to their underwear, just kind of running around, to me it just sounded like maybe they were hit by just a case of delirium from just being dehydrated from being out in the hot sun and everything.
Do you think that happened to the teacher as well? Because you do find out at a certain point in the movie that she was without her pants at the end.
Yep, and I think the one teacher who ran to the mountain to try to find the other three girls, and then she ended up disappearing, I think likely she may have been hit with dehydration that caused some sort of delirium, especially with the mention of just her running around in her underwear and everything.
I was thinking it was probably murder, but that actually makes a lot more sense. Wow, that's... I had a whole theory in my head, and I'm like, no, actually, what you're saying actually makes more sense now that I come to think of it. All right, Zero, so do you recommend Picnic at Hanging Rock?
I do, but I would say I would only recommend it if you're fine with a mystery that kind of leaves more questions than answers. This isn't a mystery that wraps up neatly with a bow on top. It's definitely not one of those. If you're looking for something like that that's kind of got the Agatha Christie neatly tied bow on top that's just absolutely perfect and everything ends with a nice clean resolution, this is not going to be it, and this will probably be a very horrible match.
I do agree with you on that sense, because the mystery is really not the point. It's what happens afterwards. I'm also going to recommend this movie, but the thing that's really I've struggled with is how much I liked it and how much I'd recommend it. I do agree with you. If you're watching this thinking, oh, are they going to solve the mystery, disabuse yourself of that real quick, because that's not the point of the movie. I think that's really not the point at all of the film. The point of it is not to be like, oh, what happened? Who did it? How did it happen? No. It's really a meditation on what happens when such a protected bubble is suddenly burst. But yeah, I do recommend it. I think the film is gorgeous in spots, especially outdoors, and the way that the cinematography is, that really elicits that mysterious, ethereal feeling that the film has. I think the cinematography is what makes it so damn good. But I will echo what you're saying as well. You really have to be in a mood to watch this. This is not a movie where like, I want to watch a good mystery. This is not the point of the film.
You definitely have to be in a mood for a mystery that makes you think. This is not going to be one that resolves just perfectly with a bow on top.
Zero, do you recommend Picnic at Hanging Rock?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Okay, so we both recommend Picnic at Hanging Rock. It is on Max right now, and I believe it's also on the Criterion channel, so check that out if you are interested. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.